Howdy, and welcome to the Petrus Development Show, where we discuss fundraising in the religious sector and how generosity and giving impacts both the organization and the donor. From campus ministries to high schools, from universities and faith-based nonprofits to Catholic parishes, we bring you stories, insights, and best practices that will inspire, educate, and inform you to go out and raise more money for your ministry and the kingdom. God bless, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, howdy everyone, and welcome to the Petrus Development Show. My name is Rhen from Petrus Development, and today joining me is Mr. Andrew Robison, owner and president of Petrus Development. How's it going, Andrew?
I'm doing great, Rhen. How about yourself?
Living the dream. Coming to you Easter week. Any big Easter traditions in your house?
Yeah, we always do an egg hunt. We do a couple of egg hunts in town. This year, a couple of weeks ago, we went to a different egg hunt in kind of like, the community egg hunt. And there's one that the university. So I live in College Station, and Texas A&M is a university, and then there's the Bush School, and the Bush Library is there for George H.W. Bush and 41. And they always put on an Easter egg hunt that we've gone to for years, since we moved back over 10 years ago. And they have games and little things for the kids, and then the Easter bunny comes, and then they do an Easter egg hunt. And we've always gone, and this year they changed the schedule. I don't really know why. And so there's like an hour and a half there was like an hour and a half gap between when the kind of game started and the Easter bunny gets there and you want to take pictures, and then when the hunt is. And I've got 4 kids, and 2 of them are pretty young, and they don't really, if you can't keep them entertained for that long. And the games are fun, but they're not that fun. so me and Cheryl were like, well, are we really going to do that? And so then we found out about another Easter egg hunt in town that was put on by just, kind of private group of realtors. And so we went there, and it was great. The kids, they had a lot of tickets in the eggs, and so then you redeem the tickets for prizes, and we ended up going home with a bag of plastic junk, but kids loved it, and it was fun, and we didn't have to sit around for an hour and a half waiting for the egg. And the other funny thing is, so one of the sponsors is Texas Roadhouse, and it's a restaurant chain. I think they have it outside of Texas as well. But Texas Roadhouse mascot is this armadillo, and so apparently there is a armadillo costume that's people that they wear at the restaurant occasionally for different things. Well, the armadillo was at the Easter egg hunt, and so we got pictures with the Easter bunny and with the Easter armadillo, which was different but pretty funny.
That's the way to do it. That's for sure.
Yeah, really, very very Texas themed Easter, I guess. Yeah.
Excellent. We always go to the Easter Vigil at our church here at the campus ministry at Michigan Tech, and Father Ben likes to make it a big deal. It starts at 9 p.m. His goal is always to hit at least 3 hours. If you don't hit 3 hours, it's a waste of time, right? So no problem this year with that. But the big deal after that is that it's always a big Easter feast starting at midnight with pizza, candy, cake, the whole thing. And my kids, we took them a few years ago, and now they demand it every year. Like, we're going to the big feast party right at midnight. They get to stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning. They usually sleep on the pew in the middle of the Easter Vigil. They just lay down at by the time you get to the 7th reading, they're out. Then the key is when Father Ben comes around, sprinkling the holy water. You got to shield the kids just so they don't wake up. They need that nap. And he likes to really sort of lay it on. So I'm sure that's always our battle. It's a good time though. Good fun.
That doesn't surprise me. My kids are, I literally don't think that they would stay awake until that late at night. Maybe I'm wrong, but we're an early to bed family. And usually by like 7:30 p.m., 3 out of the 4 kids are asleep in bed. Or at least in bed. The Ellie she'll play in her crib for a while, and then we've got on the other extreme Annabelle, who's our 14-year-old, and she would stay up till 2 o'clock on a school night if we let her, and be totally fine the next day. So
Yeah, our kids are usually early to bed, but once they learned about the pizza and candy at the middle of the night, that's it became a strong desire. We're going to that every year, so
Yeah, no, I get it. That's fun.
good fun, good fun. And you just got back from spending some time in Wyoming.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of cowboys, and were we talking about cowboys? I don't remember. Maybe we were. Oh, we were talking about Texas. Yes, we're talking about Texas armadillo and the Easter eggs. Yeah. So I took my 9-year-old Nora, and she and I, and our dog Penny, and she and I went and we stayed for a month in outside of Laramie, Wyoming, a little, not a little, a large horse ranch, and it was great. It was amazing. They have a herd of 350 wild Mustangs that live on their land. And then they've got about 200 head of cattle. And so we woke up every morning and looked out the window, and the horses are there. And it was winter, and so there was snow on the ground most days. They get a fair amount of snow, not like you up in Michigan or up in the UP, but it was great. We had a good time, and we saw horses, cows. They had some barn cats, of course. They had chickens. And then wild animals, we saw a bald eagle. Um, just driving into town one day, we saw coyotes. We saw moose a couple of times. One from our bedroom window, they ran right across the property. What else did we see? We saw snowshoe hare. They have pronghorn antelope, elk, deer, and I think that was all the animals we saw. But we saw a lot of wildlife, and weather was cold, but I appreciated it. And Wyoming is the windiest state in the country, and we were in a barn. It's a barn with an apartment, and so I appreciated the wind for what it was by the end of it, because when it came blowing down the hills across where we were, the whole barn shook. But it was fine. It was a great experience. I'm glad we went, and glad I have a new appreciation for Wyoming.
Excellent. Sounds like a great trip.
Yeah, it was good.
All right. Well, should we get down to business here?
I reckon.
All right. So today we're going to dive into what it takes to start a fundraising program. This is
Okay.
something, a lot of people, maybe a priest gets moved into a new assignment, or somebody starts a nonprofit and they get told, all right, you got to fundraise to make this happen. And nobody goes to college for fundraising. They may not have ever been around a fundraising program. So the question is, where do I even start? What is a fundraising program? What does it all mean? So let's unpack that. Hey.
This is a big topic, Rhen. How to start a fundraising program in 30 minutes or less. Is that our
Yep.
goal here?
We're going to do the crash course here.
Okay. All right, good.
So at Petrus here, we like to talk about building sustainable fundraising programs. Can you
Yeah.
talk about what that means and maybe what it doesn't mean?
Sure. So sustainable fundraising really means that you build up the systems and the processes so that when there's a change of assignment and maybe the priest or the chaplain who's there, or the executive director of the organization leaves and takes a new job, or the development director moves on to a new position, which happens, or the board changes, whatever those changes are, the systems and the process are in place so that the fundraising can continue. Because there's being in fundraising for 20 years and working with a lot of nonprofits and Catholic ministries who are either just getting started or trying to level up their fundraising, there is one certainty in fundraising, and that is it takes a consistent approach over time to build up a fundraising program. It is not something that can be started today and all of a sudden you reap the benefits of it tomorrow, and then the trend line just goes up and up and up, right? You can have fast success in fundraising, but in order to create sustainability, you have to develop the systems and the processes, and that does take consistency and it takes time.
So would you say there's a science to the process of building a fundraising program and fundraising itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a science and an art, right? And so the what does that mean to think of fundraising as a science? So two there's probably more, well there are more, but let's talk about the kind of the two main sort of verticals of fundraising, right? Number one, you have the annual fund, and the annual fund is the letters that go out, the emails, there's a lot of activities that you can do in the annual fund vertical, but basically what it means is people are supporting your organization with gifts, with checks, with credit card gifts, and they're being asked, but they're not being asked directly. They are sort of seeing the need, identifying that, and supporting your organization. And so typically annual fund gifts are smaller. They're kind of more frequent. You see a lot of dollars come in through volume because $100 at the end of the year, $50 at Easter, things like that. So that's your kind of one side of fundraising is your annual fund. The other side of fundraising is your major gifts, and this is your intentional asks, and this is where Rhen, you've been a longtime supporter of the organization. I know you care deeply about this, the work that we do, and you want to see us do more of this work. Would you consider a gift of $1,000 this year to really help us advance the work that we are accomplishing in part through support from people like you? And so that would be, major gifts. And so how do those two work together? Well, your annual fund produces your volume of donors, and then you identify who's the most interested. And then your major gifts, it produces the opportunities to go and take those annual fund donors and ask them for major gifts. Okay, so that's a long way of explaining how annual fund and major gifts work together. Your question was, is there a science to it? Yes, there is a science, because when you apply the principles of to that annual fund, that require, that what does that look like? How often are you asking for gifts? How often are you communicating with your donors? What kind of language are you using? How do you integrate your direct mail, your online gifts, your website, your phone? So all of that, there are some ways to do it properly and with maximum efficiency and effectiveness, and that's the science. And then the other kind of piece of the science, and which leads into the art, is how do you move people from the annual fund side to the major gift side through some look at the science of who's the most likely to make those gifts, and then the art is how do you develop those relationships and ask them.
So we're talking about fundraising based on relationships, right? This is a lot.
Always, yep.
This is beyond bake sales, car washes, kind of one-off events to raise a few $100s, selling
Yep.
items, selling cards. This is long-term building relationships and moving people toward becoming major donors.
That's correct. And so, I encourage people whenever they're starting with or they're getting into fundraising, or they're just trying to kind of conceptualize fundraising, put yourself in the position of the donor, right? It's easy when you work for a nonprofit to put yourself in the position of the fundraiser because you need those funds. But think of yourself as the donor. And what is it? Have you ever thought about what it would mean to make a large gift or become a long time kind of consistent, sustainable donor to an organization? And it's not generally either one of those. It's not generally um, a sort of recognition or decision that you come to on your own. It's because something about that organization, something they are doing, is prompting you to recognize a greater need, and so you become either a more consistent and frequent donor, or you become a larger donor. And so putting yourself in the position of the donor allows you to think of, all right, what would I want to see? What would I want to know about this organization to be a more consistent or a higher level donor? And then turn that around. That's what my donors want too. So that's what I need to be. That's what I should be telling and communicating them to them.
Is your organization looking to construct a new building, add more staff, or grow your programming with a capital campaign? Let Petrus Development guide you through this transformative journey. As a Teach to Fish organization, we empower you not only for today, but for a sustainable future. Our services include comprehensive campaign preparation and management. We'll craft your campaign's identity, plan events, and design compelling materials. Plus, we assist with major gift solicitations, identifying key donors, and coaching your team for success. But it doesn't stop there. We'll help you wrap up your campaign seamlessly, ensuring pledge fulfillment and effective stewardship. We'll even guide your transition into an increased annual fund, ensuring your success doesn't just end with the campaign. At Petrus Development, we're not just consultants. We're partners in your mission. Let's create something extraordinary together. Are you ready to make your dreams a reality? Sign up for a free 30-minute consultation to explore how Petrus Development's campaign services can elevate your organization. Discover the difference at petrusdevelopment.com/campaign. Your dream of impact awaits. Let's make it a reality together. Visit petrusdevelopment.com/campaign.
So, talking about major gifts and annual fund here, if you're starting from absolute scratch, you need to build a fundraising program. That can sound pretty intimidating. Who do I even go meet? Right? There's a lot of steps to kind of get there. If you're building a fundraising program, like I said, from the ground, from zero, what are kind of the layers? Where do you start, and then what do you add on as you get each piece in place?
Yeah, so there's four kind of primary layers that you're going to look at when you think of building a development office from scratch, right? And these are not linear. I tell this to people all the time because, we can say this is where you always want to start. And then all of a sudden, John Smith shows up on your step and says, "Hey, Father," or "Hey, Rhen, here's $100,000 that I need to give you." And then all of a sudden, it completely changes all of your plans, right?
Love it when
So
that happens.
yeah, that is nice. So these can operate kind of parallel to each other along the same lines, or you could play these out linearly, and one thing leads to another. But there's four kind of layers. So the first layer is vision and infrastructure. And what does this look like? It's really about what are you doing as an organization? What problem are you solving in the world? And if you had more resources, what could you do more of to solve those problems? So that's kind of your vision. Um, and then the infrastructure piece of that is the systems and the processes. And it generally starts with kind of your policies around fundraising, your procedures, your database, how are you tracking people, all of that kind of boring stuff. If you don't put that in place at some point, ideally earlier than rather than later, then your fundraising program, you might get some gifts, and then you don't really have the processes and the policies to fall back on. Okay, so layer one would be vision and infrastructure. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What problem are you solving? And if you had more resources, how could you solve it to a higher degree? So that's your storytelling piece, and then the infrastructure is your processes. Okay, so that's layer one. Layer two would be how are you communicating this vision to your donors? So a very easy, simple exercise that I've told a lot of people that are just getting started in fundraising to do is, and that don't do anything, is do you have a newsletter? And if not, could you start the practice of writing a 2-page newsletter 2, maybe 3 times a year? Okay, so what does that do? Number one, it puts you as the program guy or the program gal in a position of having to talk about what you're doing. Again, getting back to that vision, what are you doing? What problem are you solving? What are you doing? And then what impact are you having in that particular area? And while a newsletter might raise you some money, it's more about kind of shifting your mindset to, if I have the responsibility of reporting on what we're doing and then inviting people to learn more and to give, then I have to be more mindful of what we're doing, how we're tracking it, how we're communicating it, and that just sort of changes your mentality about communications and what you're doing and why it's important. So that's the second one, is communications, that layer of telling your story and then telling it consistently. Annual fund, we talked about earlier, that's your direct mail, your online gifts, your monthly gifts, your, to some extent, your events, things like that are all annual fund, where people are giving it, you're seeing an impact through volume of gifts, and you're sort of you're telling the story, and then they're responding. And then the major gifts is the people that are generally annual fund donors. You see a kind of a propensity and an inclination to give greater gifts, and so then you nurture those relationships, you cultivate those relationships in fundraising talk, and then you ask them for specific gifts for specific needs for the organization. So those are the four layers. If you're just getting started, figure out, what's your story. Start looking at databases. How are you going to track this? What are your policies and procedures? And then start with simple things like a newsletter, very simple newsletter. And then put together a calendar for your annual fund, and then identify a couple of people that you can go out and you can ask for gifts.
And as you start doing those, sending out newsletters, sending appeals, doing annual fund activities like events, phone-a-thons, whatever that might be, you start getting some people making first-time gifts, and that tells you, okay, some of these people are prospects for major gifts. That gives you your kind of first list of people to go meet face to face when you get to that major gift step.
Yeah, absolutely. My a good friend of mine, Kyle, he's been in fundraising for a long time as well, and he uses the term "spike up." And what does he mean by that? And this is kind of a mature program, but it doesn't have to. It applies to everything. But you start looking at people that sort of spike in their giving in a way that you want to know why that spike is there. So what do I mean by that? This might be somebody who, Stephanie has always given $100 at the end of the year for 3 or 4 years, and you know that about Stephanie. And then all of a sudden, one year, Stephanie writes you a check for $1,000. Well, that's a spike in her giving, and so you think, all right, what is it about Stephanie, or what is it about the experience that she had that all of a sudden she's giving $1,000? There's some kind of story there, right? And so that is a spike up, and so that's a invitation in part for you to call Stephanie and you to say, number one, thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for your gift of $1,000. That's really generous. But then, can I ask, you consistently given, but never at this level. What is it? And you find out the story that whatever the story is that Stephanie has, and then maybe that's an opportunity for Stephanie to want to learn more and give a higher level, and maybe not. But that's a spike. Another type of spike up might be a first time donor. Somebody's never given to your organization, and all of a sudden they write you a check or go online and make a gift. Any kind of sort of change in giving patterns is a spike that allows you, it presents an opportunity for you to learn more about that individual and why they're giving at a different level.
Gotcha. So as you think about all this all kind of presumes you have a list of people to communicate with, to start, inviting to your events and whatnot, whatever you're doing. Would you say that building that list, that database, is what you should really focus on in the earliest days of building a fundraising program?
So yes, it's very important for the purpose for a couple of different reasons. And so I don't think we've mentioned it yet, Ren, but we're trying to kind of lay the groundwork in this 30-minute episode, but we've got a whole digital course program called BOAT, Basic Online Advancement Training, that you can sign up for, you can purchase, and then you actually go through 12 different modules of how to build and start a fundraising program over a 10-week period. You do it in a cohort. You actually have been leading the cohorts so far.
Right.
And so there's a lot more that you learn about in that program than we're going to talk about today. I couldn't remember if we talked about that already. You mentioned that. But the reason I bring it up now is because you're talking about database. We have a whole module in the BOAT program, module 3, I think. It's pretty quick, pretty early on, where we talk about database, how to get started, how to grow your database, what kind of principles practice should every nonprofit implement in database management. And so there's a lot more there. But what I'll say now, your question is that something that you should get started early on? Yes. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I was working with a client many years ago, and they were a campus ministry at a university, and so they had alumni, going back many many years. Um, and when we first started working with them, I think on my first meeting, I started talking about database, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't have a database." And I said, "Okay, well, how do you know who your alumni are?" And so the development director, we're talking, and then he goes and he asks the secretary, the parish secretary, who had been there for 100 years, and she said, "Oh, are you talking about the boxes in the closet?" And we said, "Tell us more about these boxes." Well, they had been tracking, they had been capturing alumni or student information for years on these little cards, and the little cards all got filed into boxes that were then stored in the closet. And so once we figured that out, we're like, that's amazing. Now we know who a lot of more of our alumni are, but it took then months of data entry, and a lot of those cards were out of date and the people weren't where they were anymore. And so if they had kind of started years ago, instead of when they got those cards, putting them into a database that then was stored online or was tracked or stored digitally, then that they could have done a lot more with that than the information sitting on cards in a box.
Exactly. We can go really deep in databases, and we did actually a number of episodes ago. You can look at that. And when you think about growing your database or building that list, there's a couple of different types of organizations, right? There's campus ministries, schools, parishes that have kind of a fixed audience of people who are either involved there or have been involved there in the past, and they're not likely to find a lot of supporters outside of that group. And there's other organizations like maybe a national like teaching organization, retreat organization, where you don't necessarily have like alumni to kind of lean on as your supporters. For those kind of interest-based organizations, there's kind of a whole different process of putting yourself out there and finding the people who are interested in the work you do and adding them to your database. And we do deep dive into that within the boat program in the cohort. So I'll leave
Yeah.
it there, but it's definitely something to spend some time on and focus on.
So real quick, I got a story just to illustrate that. There's a restaurant here in town. It's a bakery, and their kind of specialty is crepes, right? And so every year, at some point in the year, I get a text or an email that says it's National Crepe Day. Come in, and we've got a special on crepes. And every year, I go in, and maybe I take a kid, maybe I get one for my wife, but I go in and I buy a crepe, right? Well, the reason that I get that trigger from that bakery is because at some point we went there, they captured my information somehow, and then my name, email, and phone number is stored in their database, right? And so every year when it's National Crepe Day, they send me a text and they send me an email, and then I'm reminded that, oh yeah, I do want a crepe, that sounds really good. And then I go in there, and then hopefully from their standpoint I become a more regular customer and all of this. But it that's a very simple way of sort of talking about not a nonprofit, but a business that at some point they captured my information. They use that information to communicate with me. In this case, all about National Crepe Day, and then as a result, I am building my relationship with this bakery over time by going in and getting crepes. So, you think about a nonprofit and the opportunity that you have to tell so much more of a story about the work you're doing, the impact you're making on the world, and how they can get involved. But that doesn't happen if you don't communicate that, and you can't communicate that regularly if you don't have my information stored in a database somewhere.
Love that. And now I'm getting hungry.
That's right.
As long as you're talking about where to spend your time when you're starting out, let's just take a second on, are there kind of fundraising activities that you should avoid putting time into when you're just starting out in fundraising?
Yeah. So, like I said, Petrus works with a lot of organizations, a lot of nonprofits to help teach fundraising, and so I've had a lot of clients over the years, and inevitably, at some point, the question of two things in particular, events and grants, always come up when I talk with a new client, or in particular with kind of the volunteers, the board or the finance council or somebody's going to say, well, when's our event going to be, or how do we get more grants? And I can speak to one of these in particular because at my old job at Texas A&M Foundation, I actually moved into a position where I was in charge of sort of soliciting grants from foundations, and so I had a lot of success in that area, um, which makes you think, oh, well, that's something that I would really advocate for, is nonprofits should all go out and write grants because you can get a lot of money. Well, you have to be in the right position, and it takes a long time to establish grants. And just as another example to illustrate that, my dad used to be the executive director of a foundation in Houston that only wrote grants to Catholic organizations. And at one point I was like, hey, Dad, how many grants do you guys make a year? And he said, oh, we give about, on average at the time, about $3 million, $3 to $4 million annually. And that goes to about 70 to 75 organizations a year. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, how many applications do you get? And he said, every year, 700 minimum for every.
Wow.
So that's like 10%. And those 10%, they've been supporting for a long time. And so it's really difficult in the world of foundations and grants to kind of break into that. And it takes time. It takes multiple years. It takes nurturing those relationships. It takes learning about the foundation members, the board members. So I always tell people, you want to start that process with grants, but never put all your eggs in that basket, because it is going to take time and you're going to be disappointed. The other one is events. Events are something that publicly everybody says, oh, that nonprofit had a really great event. They raised a lot of money. They must be loaded. Well, they never factor in the cost that it takes to run that event. The sort of margins that somebody would make on a fundraising event is not everything that's raised, because you got to pay for the chicken and you got to pay for the venue, and then the time required. And so events are something that can help you grow your database. It can help you get your message out to new audiences. It can raise some money, but a new nonprofit or a nonprofit that's just kind of trying to build fundraising can make a lot more, can use their time much more effectively and efficiently in writing letters, in going out and seeing people, building relationships, asking for money than they ever can with grants or events.
And you're talking about kind of banquets, galas, like big annual events there specifically?
For sure. Yeah. Like I said, a lot of nonprofits that we work with, they've got, event that's going back 25 years, and it's fun for the organization. They want to do it. People come to expect it, and maybe it raises them some money every year. And they're happy to do that. So I don't want to say like go out and kill your event right now, but I also want you to set clear expectations for what that event is, the purpose of it, which it should be for bringing in new donors, for communicating your message, and not as much for raising money that night or for that event. And then if you're in a position where you don't have an event, don't go out and start one immediately because you think it's going to raise all the money that you need, because there's a lot more ways to spend your time effectively and efficiently.
Do you dream of having a thriving fundraising program, but you find yourself stranded without the funds to set sail? Or are you a new fundraiser trying to make sense of how all the activities in a development office fit together? Well, your solution has arrived. It's time to embark on a transformational voyage with basic online advancement training, or BOAT, from Petrus Development. Picture this: a 10-week online course meticulously designed to equip you with the essential knowledge, strategies, and support needed to build a thriving fundraising program from the ground up. With BOAT, you won't just scratch the surface. You'll dive deep into 12 expertly crafted modules that take you step by step through the process of building your fundraising program. You'll have weekly cohort calls led by an experienced fundraising coach to guide you through implementation of the foundational elements of a development program. But don't just take our word for it. Listen to what Patty Connors from St. Thomas More Newman Center at Ohio State University had to say. Wow, there is nothing basic about BOAT. It encompassed every aspect needed for a successful advancement plan. The program is simply fantastic. Don't hesitate to start. It will be the best decision you ever make for your ministry. By the end of your journey, you won't just have theoretical knowledge. You'll have a practical, customized blueprint for your organization's fundraising success. So don't miss the boat. New cohorts set sail in January 2024. Enroll now and chart your course towards a brighter, more impactful future. Visit petrusdevelopment.com/boat today, and let's navigate this transformational journey together.
All right, let's transition here and talk about kind of the staffing side of things. So,
Great.
if you're tasked with starting a fundraising program, you might be the director of the nonprofit who then realizes they need to start fundraising, or maybe you're a staff member who is told, "All right, you're our campus minister, but you also need to start fundraising," or you're our, whatever the position might be. You're adding it on in addition to your other duties. Where do you even start with fundraising? How do you allocate the time? How much time do you need to allocate when you get started to build a fundraising program?
Okay, great questions. And so there's two ways to answer this. Number one, there's the ideal situation, which I'll talk about, and number two, there's the practical. We can't do ideal, so let's do something. Okay, so the ideal situation is that you have somebody on your staff who is a paid staff member who is paid to do 100% of their job is fundraising, and so they spend their time working on the annual fund side, writing letters, updating the website, sending thank you notes, planning out giving days, things like that, and then managing the database. And then they also spend a good amount of their time on the major gift side, which means nurturing relationships, making calls to donors, taking donors to coffee, inviting them for tours, asking for gifts. Okay. So, and the reason why you get better results with a full-time staff member is because A, it takes a lot of work, but B, it takes a lot of work and takes a lot of time. But B, we talked about the importance of relationships in fundraising, and it really is important to um, let your donors know you're committed to this work as the fundraiser. You're committed to the mission, and if they want to help in a greater way through their philanthropy, then they know who to call and who to contact that's going to be responsive and helpful. Okay, so that's ideal, is full-time staff member. And there's kind of I don't know if you asked this or if you want this level of detail, Rhen, but um, there's kind of different levels if you're just getting started. If you go out and you hire somebody who is young, who is new in their career, you're probably looking at spending, who's never done fundraising before, you're probably looking at spending somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 in a salary. Maybe you have an incentive program in there and then benefits. But if you're hiring somebody with 3 to 5 years experience, who's done this before and now wants to work for your organization, the salary is going to look more kind of like $50,000 to $60,000 with a possible incentive program and benefits. And then you kind of go up from there. The more experience they have, the more seniority that they have, the more that they have been successful in fundraising before, the higher the salary. Okay. But that just kind of gives you an idea. But I see a lot of nonprofits start with somebody who is, got a little bit of work experience, who is eager to help, who has a passion and a desire for this ministry. And, especially if the organization is willing to bring in a coach or a consulting group like Petrus and help that individual, help that team kind of get started, craft the program, and then do some training. I've seen a lot of programs be really successful with that. Okay, so that's on the full-time staffing side. There are situations, though, that a nonprofit has to start fundraising and they don't have the resources to dedicate to a full-time staff member. And so in situations like that, it usually becomes kind of a team or a joint effort. You identify somebody on the staff that has those kind of organizational and writing skills and let them focus on some of those annual fund pieces. And then you find somebody in the organization, oftentimes it's the executive director, who they can't go and they can't make 20 appointments a month seeing donors, but they can make 5 to 10. And so they're really good at the relationships, at the nurturing those contacts, and so they focus on the major gift side of things. It really is important for those to integrate through one position, but oftentimes, there's the practical side of, we just don't have the resources to hire somebody. So what can we do? In most cases, you split the job. I have seen it work with volunteers, but it's very unique and rare that it works, because volunteers, I've been a volunteer, a very committed and passionate volunteer to my kids' programs or, things like that. And at some point, my job gets crazy, family life gets crazy, and first thing to go is going to be my volunteer time, unfortunately.
Right.
And so everybody's going to get in that position. So having a volunteer who's really in charge of your fundraising can work, but there's a high level of risk there that it's going to fall apart at some point, or their energy time is going to decrease. And then also having somebody paid on your staff, there's just kind of a different level of expectation and accountability.
Great. So if you're hiring a first development staff member, what should you look for in that person?
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of things earlier. Number one, passion and desire to see the cause in your mission grow. Right? If they don't care about your mission, they're not going to be a good fundraiser. So that's number one. Number two, so passion. There's a phrase that we use in fundraising, and it's hire for passion and train for skill. Right? So the skills of fundraising can be taught, can be learned, especially if you send them through the boat program like we talked about, or you bring in a coach or a consultant from Petrus to help train them. Or you send them to a conference. We do our raise conference in the summer every year. This year's San Antonio in June. So there's ways that you can train for skill, but you have to start with a passion. But there's also kind of a components of a person's personality and what makes them, that is inherently going to make them better at all parts of fundraising or better at some parts of fundraising. So we talked about annual fund, really it takes organization, and then just the ability to tell a story, and writing is really helpful in that area because you do a lot of writing, thank you notes, newsletters, annual fund letters, things like that. So organization and storytelling is important on the annual fund side. On the major gift side, it really is, organization is important there, but it's more, that's where kind of the art of fundraising comes in. It's about how can you find somebody who is genuine, who operates with clear integrity, isn't a used car salesman type of approach to fundraising, but it really is I care about, empathy is important. I care about the donors. I care about the mission, the organization, and if I can match those two up, then we're going to have success. And so, looking for somebody in fundraising, organization, passion for the cause, organizational skills, and then the ability to tell a story and then connect with individuals. Those are some of the kind of key points personality wise. And then you can train a lot of the skill through different ways.
Excellent. Yeah. Like we said, almost nobody goes to school for fundraising, right?
Right.
Nobody got their undergrad degree in fundraising,
Yep.
which is why we built the BOAT program, basic online advancement training, to help train either new people who are just getting kind of oriented into a fundraising program, or to help those who are starting a fundraising program for their organization from scratch and want to know how to build it up. And as we're speaking right now, registration for our next session of the BOAT is open, right? So we do a cohort-based approach, and the next cohort starts the week of April 15th. And so registration is open until April 12th. And yeah, I highly recommend you come join us, and gives you a chance to network with some other people who are also in the early stages of fundraising for their nonprofits. And we'll kind of give you the roadmap, the blueprint for building out a fundraising program over the course of the 10 weeks there.
And we've had a couple of cohorts go through this already, right, Rhen?
Exactly. We've had about 4 dozen people go through the program over the last 6 months since we started it, and I think it's been great. We've had lots of good success stories. Somebody was just telling me about he had been receiving some grants from a parish for his nonprofit, and they asked him to come in and talk to their stewardship committee about receiving further grants. And he said he took some of the principles that we talked about in BOAT on how to effectively storytell and talk about the vision and the mission, and went in with the presentation there and talked about how the parish were making that nonprofit's mission happen by donating to them. And he said that the next donation he got from them was 2.5 times bigger than it had been in the past. So
There you go.
it's so fun to see those results from people as they're getting started building the programs, and just all the possibility in the world as they go forward. So check out petrusdevelopment.com/boat if you're interested. And again, registration for the next session closes April 12th, and modules start opening on April 15th, the next week. And then the
Awesome.
cohort starts meeting the week of April 22nd, and it meets every other week over the course of those 10 weeks. So
Yeah, I always tell people that, we talked a little bit earlier in the episode about the science of fundraising and how, there's the right way to do things, in terms of frequency and the language that you're using. And so we talk about a lot of that in the BOAT program. But people ask me all the time, you've been in fundraising for 20 years. Is it a really hard job? And I tell people all the time, fundraising is simple, but that doesn't make it easy. But the simple things, they're not always intuitive if you don't have that kind of background and that experience in fundraising. And so that's what we try to do in the BOAT, right? It's simple lessons that we're teaching. It's not complicated stuff. And we're just trying to kind of direct people in, look, if you're going to be fundraising, go through this program, and it might shave a year off of your learning process, because you're going to learn all these things the hard way. But wouldn't you rather learn them quickly and in a fun environment that you can put this stuff into use a lot sooner? And so the example that you talked about right there, right, like that's he he could have gone and talked to that council 10 more times before with the same message that he had been saying before, but that little tweak in how you communicate, how you make them the hero of the story, how you talk about the mission and the outcomes versus just what you're doing, that all of a sudden ticked their giving up 2.5 times immediately. Made a difference in their fundraising efforts. And those are the kind of simple, small changes that you can make when you learn the science of fundraising that can have a big difference.
Exactly. Great. Any last thoughts on getting started with building a fundraising program here?
You got to have patience. We started this earlier. It's not you. I've seen organizations have immediate success, which is great. It's always happy to celebrate that. But to create real sustainability, to create a program that will last from executive director to executive director or fundraiser to fundraiser over the years, it really is about consistency, and doing the right things. And you got to have patience and let the process play out. We love talking about. We've got another podcast, the Holy Donors, and one of our new seasons is Vince Lombardi. Great coach. Really took the Green Bay Packers and made them a dynasty back in the the 60s. But he had one play that he did over and over and over again. It was the Green Bay sweep, or the Packers sweep, excuse me. And he would, he trained the players, know your position, play your position, don't get fancy, don't go out of line. We're going to do this play until they stop us. And he had 10 years of success there at Green Bay doing very simple things over and over again and doing them very well. And there's a lot of parallels to that to fundraising, right? You learn the right way to do things, you do them consistently, and you will have success over time.
Great. Well, Andrew mentioned earlier, we have our conference, Raise 24, Petrus's conference, and it's coming up in June in San Antonio, Texas, where you can go hang out with those cowboys and the armadillos we talked about earlier. Yeah. And in celebration of Easter, we have a promo going on, so you can get 10% off registration. Each person you register can get 10% off. Use the promo code OCTAVE, OCTAVE, because it is the octave of Easter, through this Friday, April 5th. And it'll automatically take 10% off your registration. Come join us. Come join dozens or hundreds of other Catholic fundraisers and to network and learn about the best practices in fundraising.
Sounds great. I can't wait. I'll be there.
Love it. And finally, if you want to get a little preview of the boat program, we're actually giving away the Laying the Foundation module for free right now. You can go just grab that for free. Check out what's all in there, how the video lessons work, all the different resources you can download along with each lesson. If you go to petrusdevelopment.com/140, you'll be able to access that for free. This is episode 140 of the Petrus Development Show. And so petrusdevelopment.com/140. That'll get you free access to that module of the boat program, and you can check it out and see if you like it.
Great.
If you have a question you would like Andrew to answer on one of the future episodes of Petrus Development Show, you can email it into podcast@petrusdevelopment.com, and we may talk about it. So please send us your questions. Other than that, we'll catch up with you next time, Andrew.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Rhen. It's been fun.
All right. God bless.
This conference is well worth the entire experience, especially for the faithful looking to build the body of Christ. That's what one ministry director said after attending the Petrus Development's Raise conference in 2023. A fundraising staff member from a different organization had this to say: "I have several years of experience fundraising, and I found the conference applicable to me. I also saw new to fundraising people getting a lot out of it too. There is literally something for everyone here." In 2024, Raise, the Catholic Fundraising Conference, will be even bigger and even better. Join us on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas, June 24 through 26, 2024. Raise 24 will feature outstanding speakers, great networking opportunities, and an authentically Catholic conference experience. Registration is open now. Learn more at petrusdevelopment.com/raise24. That's petrusdevelopment.com/raise24. I'm so glad that you could join us for this episode of the Petrus Development Show. Do you know anybody whose ministry needs to take their fundraising to the next level? Please pass along the show to them. And if you haven't already, take a minute and do 3 things. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And check out our website, petrusdevelopment.com. Your ministry and the kingdom need good people doing great development work, and your donors receive just as much benefit from giving as your organization does from receiving. And as it says in Luke 5, cast your nets out into the deep. Be bold and the Lord will provide. God bless, and we'll see you next time.